Hello everyone, and this is Flammamancer coming to you live from the Matrix. So anyways, yeah, I'm off to a bit of a rant today. I'm not editing out mistakes, I just don't have the time to make everything perfect. But anyways, this is the channel Defrauded Students. It's a channel dedicated to students that were defrauded by their institutions of higher learning. They were lied to about things such as cost of education, the quality of education they would receive, and the job placement rates. The first names that come to mind in this business are ITT Tech and Corinthian College. So if you want to read for hours on end about that, just go to Google and type in ITT Tech scam or Corinthian College scam to read to your heart's content. But there are probably a lot of people out there that are trying to figure out how we fell for this kind of thing. I mean, maybe it's more obvious towards the end of their existence, these two schools that I mentioned, and people are probably wondering, how they fall for it. Well, there's a list of things as to how they became what you could argue as the perfect scam. And so I went in the early 2000s, and my experience is probably not the same as somebody that went in into the 2010s, but they for me they were taking advantage of the mindset that we had at that time. I was raised during the 80s and 90s, and our mentors, the teachers, cops, parents, whatever. They taught us a particular mindset about college and ITT Tech. They took advantage of that, very much so. So, I mean, to list some things, we were taught to look up to education of higher learning, and we were taught to look at as professors, for example, as authority figures, people who had our best interests of heart, people that cared about America's youth, stuff like that. And we were taught that once you start college, you do not give up. You keep going until you're finished. And they take advantage of that too later on. So you go in with that mindset. You believe, all right, these people really do care. They are an American institution, right? I mean, back then, in the early 2000s, ITT Tech especially had a reputation, at least at that time. So, you go in with this mindset, and everything they tell you is believable. And you cannot conceive of a scam school. That just doesn't conceive in your mind. I mean, if you went to a place and they were doing classes out of a trailer or something, maybe then you would be like, questionable, but no. So you have no concept that they may be lying to you, or that they may be trying to deceive you in any way, and you believe that these are the genuine people that your mentors told you about. And then you might be asking, well, how did you justify the cost? Because I mean, they didn't lie to me about the cost. Other places can, but they didn't lie about me. So you asking how did you justify the cost for going in? Well, at least at that time, there were smaller class sizes. So smaller class sizes partially justifies the cost. There was an ebook library called the ITT Tech Technical Student Library that they told us was going to be, our access to it would be lifetime. It would continue after it graduated, and the cost of covering it was included in tuition. And we were also told that part of the cost justification, and this made sense at the time anyway, was that the reason why it costs more is because ITT Tech covers more. They cover more technical skills than things like poetry and stuff like that. Now, well, that was kind of true. Later on, that wasn't really all that true. They did have classes that were meant to expand your mind, but I mean, to some degree they were right. There weren't as many poetry classes and that kind of thing, liberal arts or something that you'd see in a traditional university. So, okay, all these things like this, I could list more other things, but they're relatively minor. The three major things that sold it to me was what I just told you. Smaller class sizes, the ebook library, which had a lot of books in it, and I don't know what the cost would be in a today, at least today anyway, what the cost would be for a library like that, but I could see it costing several $1,000s over a period of years, and if that's included with the cost of tuition like they told me, then that would make sense. And like I said, more focused on the technical skills, which is the most expensive part of the whole training course, justified the cost, at least in my mind anyway. I later learned, though, that that employers didn't care about any of that at all. They actually wanted they'd rather have a person with a bachelor's degree that had the same number of classes in technical skills, but let's look at the poetry and all that. They didn't recognize this idea that ITT Tech had, that an associate's degree from them was just as good as supposed to be good, just as good as a bachelor's degree from a normal institute of learning. They didn't see it that way because they weren't hiring us, I guess. But yeah, so anyways, so that's what gets you in the door. The mindset they give you about school when you're growing up during the 80s and 90s. This idea that the higher institutions of learning are infallible, that these people really do care to some extent about you, which is to say that they're looking out for America's youth and all that stuff, and the idea that a fake school just couldn't possibly exist. So I went in there, and then you might be asking, why didn't you get out when you started to sniff a rat? Well, for me at least, I didn't really notice anything was wrong until maybe 1/3 of the way in, maybe somewhere between 1/3 to halfway in. I in the beginning, I was getting what I wanted out of it. I mean, it wasn't you have to understand there's a certain transition point to their going over the dark side, or at least for my particular campus. Other campuses may be different. I've heard people going back to the late 90s about how theirs was going down from there. So I suppose that the fall may be slightly different from campus to campus, because there's always the chance that they will hire and keep a good instructor. And the only thing they care about is how many people they're passing. So, yeah, it's possible you could get a good one here and there. So, in the beginning was what I thought it was. The college math classes that they were giving in the very beginning was what I expected, but things didn't crop up until later on, when things happened like when I had the college instructor. They call them instructors, not professors, because they're not real professors. I learned that later on. The reason why they're called instructors is because they're not real professors, which say they're not qualified to teach. But partway through, maybe I don't know, like I said, 1/3 to halfway through, I started getting instructors that were doing things like they had weird ways of teaching the class. They'd make up these strange rules that didn't make any sense. Like one started asking questions in the homework that had nothing to do with the material we're studying. And when we asked why, they said, well, the reason why I have to do that is because you guys are breaking the rules. I told you to work as individuals and not as a group. And you're working together as groups, so I have to make the homework harder to challenge you guys. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm doing what you told me to do. I'm working as an individual. And these questions that have nothing to do with the material we're covering is just wasting my time in the afternoon, because I have to go look to other source materials to study what you're talking about to actually find the answer and provide a educated response. And then eventually got up to instructors I really didn't know what they were talking about at all. I had a electrical engineering class where I couldn't get any of my projects to work. Looking back at it today, I think what it was, I had a bad breadboard. But you have to understand that I did not know what was wrong, and I was looking to them to figure out what I needed to do. And like I said, I'm paying extra money for smaller class sizes that can look at this kind of stuff and to some extent hold me by the hand. And they couldn't get it to work either. And when I was lagging behind the class, they just told me, you gotta catch up. And so then I'm finding myself stuck in a position where the instructor doesn't know what to do, and I don't know what to do either. And like I said, looking back at it today, with the wisdom that I have, is I probably just had a bad breadboard. I probably needed to just throw that one out and get a new one, but at the time I didn't know exactly what to do. I would have, with wisdom I have now, I would have just said, okay, first replace the breadboard. If that doesn't work, start replacing the components you're using until it works. It just tended to do in the book. But the instructors back then, that are even older than I am now, supposed to have more experience, couldn't figure that out. And now that I'm looking back at it now, I think it's pretty ridiculous. So anyways, now you're probably thinking, okay, well, at that point, why didn't you leave then? Well, there were other people that tried to do that. They tried to leave, and they tried to sue for a refund. But there's a problem. You can't do that. They have it in there. When you go into ITT Tech, you sign a paper saying that you can't sue the school, and they're not going to give you a refund. So that was kind of the beginning. At that point, when I was talking to other people that were going through this, that's kind of the beginning of our probing the system to see what we couldn't do, and they could not get a refund. So at that point, you're stuck with, well, I can quit and go against. Remember, I was given the mindset that you'd never quit, no matter what. And this mindset was put into me by people that didn't understand that there may be perfectly logical and tactical reasons why you may need to leave college. They couldn't conceive of it. So I'm there and I'm like, well, I've been taught since a kid you just do not quit college. And I'm stuck with the choice of either quitting. And remember that the college credits don't transfer. So if I leave, I'm just stuck with debt and no degree to show for it. And if I go to someplace else, I have to start all over again. I can either do that, which has risk, or I can try to stay in this institution of higher learning and maybe after this class things will get better. I don't know. And then see if things just work out anyway after graduation. And of course, that's what I went with. That's what a lot of people went with, really, because like I said, they talked to the guy that quit and tried to get a refund, and they failed, and they came to the conclusion that I did. Well, okay, might as well just stay in, I guess. So things didn't get better; they only got worse. Came up to the worst case scenario was one where I had the instructor that was trying to teach us how to use an ISA server, a Microsoft ISA server, and he couldn't even get it to start. It was just every day coming to class, and he couldn't get it to start up. We just sat there reading our books while he tinkered away at it, and we couldn't bring it home because he had the hard drive that it was on. It was a Microsoft product that you got to pay for to use. And back then, I remember this was the earlier days of the internet where they just didn't have an abundance of online tutorials to how to learn how to use that kind of thing. So we couldn't just look it up online how to use it, maybe learn a few grams and move on. But no, he got it just to start at the very last day of class, and he just gave us all an A. That was the worst That was the worst example, but there were other classes that were similar to that, where they had similar levels of incompetence. And so, graduated from ITT Tech, and so moving on from there, I did not know that employers were not accepting my degree. And there were particular cases where it looked like it was solid. Because I wasn't somebody, you have to remember, I wasn't somebody that just graduated from high school and then oh my, I need to get an education so I can get a good job. It wasn't like that. I started learning the IT field when I was much younger. And I took every opportunity that I could during the 80s and 90s to find computer hardware and learn how to use it. I mean, I still remember before I even had a computer, and I knew, okay, this is where the money's going, is within computers. I need to learn how to use these things. Because that's where the money's going. I wasn't getting into it because I wanted to avoid hard labor. It was nothing like that at all. I mean, I have a hard manual labor job today, and I don't have any problem with it, with just the hard manual labor part. So back then, I remember before I even had a computer, I was like, okay, step one is I got to learn how to type. So I started out with a typewriter. And so that way, when I finally did acquire a computer of my own, I would be ready. And so I was going to places like my neighbor's house, and I had a neighbor that they had acquired these old hospital medical database computers. The exact name of the model escapes me today. But anyways, I took time to learn how to use this computer that ran purely off like a command prompt-like system, and I had to find out what a database is. I didn't know what one was until we booted that thing up and took a look at it, and I learned how to use it. And then after graduation from ITT Tech, there's a job that requires you to know how to use one, and I knew, okay, the people that know how to use this thing is extraordinarily rare. And I thought I had an airtight resume and cover letter to go along with it, explaining, how I'd acquired the skills to know how to use those things, and I didn't even get a phone call. And it just blew my mind away. I couldn't figure it out. And like I said, I didn't know that I was being rejected based on my degree. And part of the reason I didn't know that was the problem is because these businesses were not speaking out about it. They don't speak out. They never do. And when later on, when I figure out more about this, you get other people that know people to ask, why aren't you speaking up about it? And basically it boils down to they're afraid of getting sued, and they don't want to be put in the spotlight for it. The way they see it is it's an unnecessary risk to speak up. They're going to have a moment in front of the camera, and they have nothing to gain from such a thing. So, moving on, I didn't know that they weren't taking my degree, and it wouldn't be until later on that I figured that out, and then by that time I'm stumped. And I never got a single interview or phone call with my degree, even though I already had skills that I'd acquired before ITT Tech to go along with it. And so that's how people like me fell into that, into it. I had the mindset before going in that colleges had a certain amount of infallibility, and then they worked on that, and they justified the cost of going through the degree program and all this stuff. Like I said, it was perfectly logical going in. I made what looked like was a good decision. So I think it's very important that people understand that not everybody going into those schools were stupid. I mean, yes, there are some that they see some commercial. They see a commercial for some college, and it shows the kids sitting around playing video games. There really is one out there like that. I'm not kidding. It shows these kids playing video games, and it advertises to go in and get your degree in beta testing video games or something like that. And that's crazy. Yes, I know there are some kids that went in making ill-informed decisions. They still don't deserve what happened to them, because they're being preyed upon for their naivety. But I'm just trying to point out that a lot of us went in not knowing there's any problems. And the last problem is that, like I said, nobody spoke up about it. We went in not knowing anything about the bad reputation at all. And so, lastly, to end this all, the scam is continuing. Nothing's being done about it today. If you want to look into it, consider this. There's these popular online degree programs in game design. I'm not going to be brave enough to mention any names, but do you really believe the demand for game design degrees is so high? I've been talking to a person that's involved in this, in a game design degree online, and it's just a scam. But again, nobody's talking about it. Has there been any? Do you see any news segments talking about questioning the worthwhileness of a game design degree? I don't. I never have. The only place that I've seen where they're talking about it as a problem is on Reddit forums and stuff like that. And again, it's the same problem that I just talked about. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to be put in the spotlight. Nobody wants to get sued. So, like I said, for the free market fanboys out there, why isn't the free market fixing it? There's only one person that's going to fix it. Well, okay, government is a person, but there's only one entity that's probably going to fix it, and that's the government. The free market's not going to fix it, because these businesses are all in it for themselves. They don't care about all the people wasting their lives away on this stuff. They don't care. Nobody cares about America's youth. Nobody has some kind of emotional invested interest in America's youth and people's lives and stuff like that. It's just they're on it for themselves. And like I said, it's probably going to be the government coming down with a great big hammer to fix it all. So, Flymamancer out.